It's that time. Your fix is here. College football is a year-round discussion with these two. Here's JC and Morgan. Mike Morgan of ESPN and JC Shurburtt of 24/7 Sports have you covered, beginning right now.
And it is a good morning and welcome everybody. The final JC and Morgan of the month of June as we inch closer and closer to kickoff. We welcome everybody tuning in on a myriad of formats, from our YouTube audience to Facebook to Twitter to Spotify to iTunes to Google Play, the Chief Sports app. And of course, you can check out the website and listen there to this episode and other episodes from years past. Some 245 to this is 246. See, it's right there at the top of the screen. That's why we have the Mad Dog, Phil Mullinax, keeping us all straight. If only he could have done that last night on a certain debate. But anyway, welcome everybody. That's as deep as we're getting into that, I can tell you. Unless Josh Pate has some strong thoughts on it, we'll check in with our buddy Josh, the late kick, friend of the show. You'll notice we go really guest heavy in the off season, and then we have random guests from particular school sites and what have you. And then we have national guys. And then we just have a few that are in kind of our friends of the program circle, if you will, from Tim Brando to Tom Luganville. And I would certainly consider Josh Pate one of those guys. He'll now be part of the rare three-timer club. That's a very special and distinguished club. If only we had something to give these people for their time. All we can do is give them our love and affection virtually on this program. There's a lot to get to, and we'll check in with Josh on some other shows that we're part of on Chief Network. We even had some people asking Josh questions for when he comes on our show, and we'll get to those. Everything from ACC departure court case gate, which is going to ramp up here in a couple of weeks, the state of college football as a whole. You got the coaches about to be center stage. Media days is not far off. So we have a lot of things to talk about and a lot of newsworthy things. I mentioned Phil Mullinax. It's time to mention JC Shurburtt, Shurb Nation, the Shurbmeister, the Shurbinator. Welcome, JC.
Hello. Good to be with everybody today, and ending the week with a bang here on JC and Morgan on the Chief Sports app. Always great to catch up with Josh. Josh and I have a lot in common as far as kind of our philosophies on college football. We don't agree on everything. Nobody does, but besides the fact he's in great shape and wears a form-fitting white t-shirt, and I need Jesus in that department. But it's other than that, he and I have seen eye to eye. I've used to go on a show in Columbus, Georgia. And it's kind of like, it's funny, both you guys got your start in Columbus.
Yeah,
so that's
Columbus, GA, baby.
So I think he's an absolute superstar in our sport and space and whatever you call it. Glad he's with 24/7 Sports and CBS, and certainly deserves all the success he's had. But, he's an important person to kind of talk to during this time. I mean, because he's got, he's not one that just throws speculation out there ever. So when he says something, it's probably well sourced. And so kind of his dropping of hints, so to speak, and the things he's reported, and sort of his thoughts about the future of college football, they're very important at this critical time. I think when we get back from our hiatus or break or whatever, we're really going to start focusing more on like the actual season. and all that. And so this is a good chance to get one big whammy in there about all this topical stuff before we kind of dive into 2024.
Yeah, there'll be plenty of lists that we can get into in short time, and the top defensive tackles in the SEC, the most exciting offenses, the loudest crowds according to EA Sports. These are all very pertinent things that we'll get into during the talking season, as one Steve Spurrier used to call it. But there's so many things. I've mentioned this before. Like, JC, you and I have been doing this for a while, and I'm sure there were people. Our audience is nationwide, and we love everybody everywhere. We love hearing from people in Texas and California and Michigan, but obviously there's a huge part of our audience that is SEC centric. SEC football fans love a show like this because we talk about college football 52 weeks out of the year. As we like to say, we're on campus 52 weeks out of the year. And so SEC fans can kind of dominate the conversation. I think Big Ten is going to be right there as well. So I'm sure a lot of people were wondering, like a year or whatever it was ago, why is Mike fascinated with the potential of Colorado leaving the pack? Because the people that I talked to said it was a really distinct possibility. In fact, we had a guest on, I know, happened to be a former coach there, who basically broke that story before anybody had it. And then you had to read the tea leaves. Like, if that happens, the pack is done. That's why it was important. It wasn't about Colorado. I don't know if we have two people that listen out of the state of Colorado to this show, but the ramifications of all that mattered. Why do I say that? Because this Florida State Clemson thing, if you don't care about Florida State or Clemson, okay, I get it. But if they do, and we'll talk to Josh about this, if they are successful in getting out of these deals, and I don't know how long it would take, and I don't like to get too deep in the weeds and the legal stuff because I don't understand half of it, to be honest with you. I just know that there's too many people that I respect. 3 years ago, there were people throwing darts at a board. I just talked to so-and-so in Pickens County, and I'm here. And then would reported this fact, and I'm like, no, that contract is pretty ironclad. What you heard was a rumor, or somebody who wanted something to happen. That's not a factual story. It's now gotten to the point where I don't know if you can find, JC, a national pundit that truly believes that Florida State and Clemson are in the ACC long term. I don't know if that person exists anymore. And if they don't,
no,
then what does that mean? Is it a Colorado, the finger in the dike, so to speak, and you let it out, and it's like, now what? Now,
yes.
they made that move to add those 3 schools. Part of that was just to protect themselves from having to dissolve. They wouldn't have to dissolve if they lost Florida State and Clemson.
I mean, you would
keep their TV deal.
You would end up getting the problem. The reason you had SMU, Stanford, and Cal is and crazy enough, it was Notre Dame's idea to push for this. I think the Irish have always kind of looked after themselves, and since they signed he says they signed a new TV deal, it's going to give them about $70 million a year, which, I mean, that's less than what the SEC, but that's still a good chunk of change, and you get exclusivity. They need a place for their other sports to play, and frankly, for their other sports, the ACC is much superior to an alternative like the Big East. Where there's certain sports that aren't, all that good, and basketball would probably never win a game. But it's a good setup for the Irish. They're like, well, we love Stanford and play Stanford every year anyway. Cal's an academic institution, and then SMU just basically bought their way in. Like, just as we found out recently, things are a little different in Texas, but that was to secure, because when you look at, like, who cares about, who's really wanting to get out and who's not, you could see a situation where in the NC States and Miamis and Virginia Techs of the world could be convinced this is in their best interest, not just because the speculation as far as expansion goes. You hear a little Miami talk, not a lot. Florida State, Clemson, North Carolina, Virginia. Those are the 3-4 schools that you see that for. And so, so you would need 8. So there's already 4. And, Miami, Virginia Tech, NC State, throw who else in there? Pitt, somebody, that's a really football school. And and you could get it done. So that's why they did that. But, I read something about the Pac-2, the 2-pack, and the future of that. They're kind of keeping that $65 million in the coffers in case the ACC implodes. So how about that? So
Yeah.
you could see an implosion of the ACC, and then the Western schools go back to the Pac, and then some Eastern schools come back to the Pac. I mean, it's crazy. Is that good for college football and sports? No, but it's getting crazy. And all I can say about the ACC is they did it to themselves. You need to be a little more visionary than to lock your league into a 16-year deal like that. I understand why they did it, because we talk about Virginia. I have some people that work there, and when Maryland left for the Big Ten, and there were all that talk swirling, there were meetings on campus in Charlottesville, from what I was told. I can't confirm it. Rumor. Chalk it up as a juicy rumor, where it looked like for a while that UVA was next out the door to the Big Ten. If you think about it, at the time, with what Jim Delaney was trying to do, Virginia would have been obvious. Academic school, that was important at the time, state university, and you get the state of Virginia for cable purposes. And that was the 2011 expansion. So Virginia was right next out the door. And if that had happened, everybody, I mean, it's a free for all. They were talking about Florida State and Clemson going to the Big 12, that kind of thing. So I understand why, but I also think, you need to be a little more visionary than that and kind of understand. So they did it to themselves. That conference has made terrible move after terrible move. When North Carolina is a school, you're talking about leaving that league is as we call it, toast.
It's in
because
trouble.
They're Alabama, that league. But we're living in a world where Texas walked away from all that power they had in the Big 12.
Yeah.
And now they just get to do like gangster things, not conference wide, but
right,
statewide, right? So anyway, I think it's interesting. This is the next round of it, and it'll be interesting to see what happens.
Well, I mean, if half these rumors are true, and you could potentially lose North Carolina, Virginia, Florida State, and Clemson, it's game over. I mean, it's at that point, if you still call it a Power 4 league, it's number 4 behind the Big 12, and then a chasm with the SEC and the ACC. Before we break and get into Josh Pate, I know you and I have talked about this on other shows, but 99% of what we talk about here is college football, not because we don't love the other sports, just because that's kind of our niche, is what we do. But the situation with Texas A&M having its college baseball coach poached, literally like a day after playing in the national championship game, this has like a football feel to it, right? I mean, you got two titans in Texas and Texas A&M who are about to be SEC rivals. They basically are now. That move, and we were trying to like put it in terms of football. Tommy Tuberville leaving Ole Miss to go to Auburn. Dan Mullen left Mississippi State to go to Florida. But these were not exactly earth-shattering moves. You can go all the way back to the Bear. He went Kentucky to A&M to Alabama. But I just like I don't see anything like Lane Kiffin's going to be rumored for every job under the sun as long as Ole Miss keeps flirting with 10-win seasons. But I don't know if we're going to see anything like this in football anytime soon. That is just massive to be able to do that.
There's no way. I mean, it's the most. I called it Bill King yesterday. I called it the most gangster college athletics move I've ever seen.
Yeah,
because that's not going and hiring Baylor's coach. Or Texas Tech. I mean, Texas Tech hates Texas, right? They consider that a rivalry. I don't know about Texas, but that's not like going and poaching Texas Tech. All that's been done before. I mean, to get in-state coaches to the 40 acres is not rare. It's like Mississippi taking Mississippi State's coach, or Auburn. Nick Saban leaving Alabama after he played for the national title and taking the Auburn job. It's just rare. I mean, you don't see it, and it's gang, and it makes it worse for A&M, because A&M historically we all speak highly of them because they've got so many resources. It's such a big school. It's such a great fan base, strange as they are. So much money, but you really look at the history of that athletic program, and they haven't won much.
No, we broke it down.
They don't have much of the
1939.
Yeah, and they won a national title in women's basketball the last 20 years. And other than that, no baseball, no men's basketball, football. I mean, so anyway, I know Josh is in, so
we'll get to that.
I'm curious to get his take.
We are as well. We'll get to the JC5 Group John. Group 5 John will chime in. He's got some coaches on the radar for Power 4 jobs.
Make sure you put that of 5, because Group John could be interpreted a lot of different ways.
That's true.
Group of 5 John.
I never know where that mind of yours is going. All right, we'll take a time out. Josh Pate on the other side of Late Kick will join us here on JC and Morgan, presented by Nest and Wild Mattress.
Hey, folks, want to tell you about our friends at Titan Construction Group really quick. They're a Mid-Atlantic-based general contractor, specializes in retail, restaurant, and office construction. TCG strives to separate itself from other general contractors by adding value every step of the process. From project budgeting to estimation, value engineering to construction, they focus on those relationships and not the transaction. Titan builds partnerships one project at a time. Among their clients are Starbucks, Crumble Cookie, Blake Pizza, Home Goods, 15 plus years experience, based in Midlothian, Virginia, and contracted in Virginia, West Virginia, North Carolina, and South Carolina. So get on their website, TitanCGinc.com. That's TitanCGinc.com. Get in touch with Brad if you're in need of a general contractor that focuses on going above and beyond for their clients. That's Titan Construction Group, a proud sponsor of the JC and Morgan podcast.
Listen up. This is for construction professionals, contractors, facility managers, or do-it-yourself homeowners. SitePro Rentals is ready to equip your upcoming project. We rent construction equipment for any size job. Boom and scissor lifts, telehandlers, skid steers, excavators, air compressors, generators, even small tools and equipment. SitePro has you covered. If you are ready for better equipment rental, call SitePro and rent from the local, friendly, easy to do business with equipment professionals. Call 972-RENT-NOW. That's 972-736-8669 to rent the newest equipment in the Atlanta market. Call 972-RENT-NOW or visit SiteProRentals.com.
We're passionate about making sure that the Nest and Wild mattress is the best it can be. Made well and made right here in Tupelo, Mississippi. So how can we do all that? Work. Hard work. And that means something. The Nest and Wild mattress is a movement. It's a pride in where you come from and where you're going. So get comfortable, because this movement is just beginning.
And we welcome you back. It is JC and Morgan, again presented by Nest and Wild Mattress, the most comfortable mattress on the market. Check out nestandwild.com to improve your sleep each and every night. Led by Brandon Jameson, the CEO straight out of Tupelo. He'll even answer the phone when you call to make the order. That's Nest and Wild Mattress. Much promised in our cameo once again with Josh Pate. We consider him a friend of JC and Morgan, a distinguished member of the Three-Timer Club. You got Brando, you got Luganbill. I might be leaving somebody out, but Josh, this is a distinguished honor. If you want to share, make a few phone calls to your family and friends later on and share the good news. It's kind of like a gender reveal party. It's the JC and Morgan Three-Timer party. So please accept our very humble and gracious celebratory appearance that you have here today. Thank you so much for taking out the time.
Yeah, I sent the text to my mom this morning, and it said, "Mom, it's happening." And she said, "All right, I'll be tuned in." She already knew what I was talking about. So
see,
wow.
That's fantastic. Mom is on board. We love to hear that. So where do you want to start? We got a bunch of topics. I figured your top two would be either last night's presidential debate or the loud crowd rankings on EA Sports college football. Which one of those two steal the show for you?
Apparently, they're both politics, so I'm not sure there's a lot of separation between the two. You know, you guys remember when social media when everyone was on social media, the first couple of presidential elections, the first big political things that happened, and everyone had failed to realize it's best to just keep your mouth shut unless you actually cover politics. Those were wild times. That was the true Wild West. I know people looked at last night's debate and they had all these thoughts. That's not the Wild West of social media politics, though. Social media politics, Wild West, was back before people had realized, oh, there's nothing to gain and everything to lose from me, the college football guy, talking about my political thoughts on this. So right. I overall, with exceptions, thought that the sports commentary landscape kept itself pretty tame last night. I saw a few folks who couldn't contain themselves, but by and large, I was proud of we as a sporting people that we just trashed both guys in our group texts instead of publicly. So golf clap for everyone.
There you go. There you go. We talked about this a number of times during COVID. That was revealing for a lot of people because there were a number of people that cover college, like it's their job. They get a paycheck every 2 weeks to cover one thing and one thing only in college football. And they saw COVID and everything going on as their avenue to become a CNN political pundit on every single issue as if we care what they thought. I thought it was revealing, but thankfully 4 years later, I think, like you said, most people are staying in their lane, so to speak. So I got to ask you right off the top, the whole, we've talked about this a lot, the Florida State Clemson situation, the ACC situation. You had people trying to break this story 3-4 years ago, and clearly it was premature. You had people trying to say this is a done deal now, and clearly it was premature. I get the feeling now it's a little bit different. Like this is, we're now talking specifics. This is not just something in the ether. And you, I think, dropped some pretty significant hints. Correct me if I'm wrong about this, about what you think might be happening really in the next couple of weeks. We're talking about mid-July, are we not?
Yeah. July, August, something like that. I want to be very, very careful to state the audience is coming to the wrong guy if they're coming to me for legal specifics.
Right.
I'm very, very upfront in saying I have no clue how that works. What I will tell you is a lot of us do the spring speaking circuit. You may go to different booster club events, quarterback club events, and you meet a wide array of people there, much more so than maybe like JC you would meet on your message board, or Mike if you're hosting a show, because that's the same rotation of folks who come in every day. But you go and speak at some of these bigger events, you got all kinds of different people that you otherwise never would have interacted with. So I'm doing that this past spring. And Atlanta, Charlotte, like a lot of these big places, and a lot of big legal types end up showing up to these events. And it was so interesting because I got pulled aside by a couple of them. And one in particular put me in contact with someone who is working legal on this case. And this person has no issue whatsoever with watching the ACC implode because they don't care about it. This person probably couldn't tell you the mascot for Florida State. So they don't care about the sports side at all. But they know I do. And so they've been very guarded with information, very, very slow to reveal anything because, I mean, it's their job to not do that. Well, that's why the other day when they texted me and said, get ready, it's coming, voluntarily, they just texted me that. I said, wow. And so I dug and couldn't get much else out of them other than, yeah, that thing you've been interested in, it's coming. So I tweet out the whole Jurassic Park, like, you know, water in the cup emoji or a GIF. And a lot of people noticed that. And a lot of people said, well, what do you mean? What's the timeline? I don't know. What's the specifics? I have no idea. Who's leaving? Who's staying? I don't know. And let me take it a step further. I'm not quite sure that many people in the room do know those specifics. But I do know that, and this is we could go 2 hours on the whole state of the ACC over the past several years. But I do think that it's tough for me, absent the specifics, it's still tough for me to envision how many of these parties are motivated to get out, how much whisper we've had about private equity money and this and that around. It's tough for me to envision all that being in the room and there not eventually being action on that front. So I think a couple of truths here. Number one, if folks are being honest, including myself, hardly anyone knows the exact A to Z of how that's going to go down. But also, I think you can have pretty guided, informed opinion that something is going to go down.
It just seems the one thing it's not speculative. If you just read any part of the court cases, and I'm like you, I mean, after the second paragraph, I'm like, okay, this is beyond my depth. Yeah, exactly. Is there a lawyer in the house? And then very often you can't even get lawyers to agree on exactly what all it means and what's going to happen. But it's crystal clear. They want out. And the only thing that has been contrary to that is, yeah, they want out, but so what? The doors are padlocked in the way of a contract that goes through 2036. And then the flip side is, and I've made kind of a loose analogy to this. I know it's not the same thing. It's not apples to apples, but like SMU, they knew the only way they're getting in a conference like the ACC is if they said, we don't need your stinking TV money. We got this. We'll find our own money. That's a power play. That's a major flex. Like I say what you want about SMU football and what they've been and how relevant they've been. That's a major flex, and I've got respect for a major flex. If Florida State and Clemson, and I'm more familiar with Florida State, to be honest with you, I've got a pretty good source there. And the one thing that keeps coming up is that, look, we're ready to forfeit a lot of money.
Yep.
So if money is the only thing they have on us with this contract, we can find enough to get out. Now, at that point, it becomes potential settlement, what have you. So that's the new X factor. If they can pull like an SMU type of flex and say, fine, millions upon millions of dollars be damned, we're still getting out. And then you look at where these court cases are being held, and you look at the momentum of these cases. Even me, a legal novice, can see clearly they're making all the right steps to get out. That's the only thing that says to me, okay, this is different than the rumors we heard 3 years ago about a couple programs that just weren't happy.
Yeah. Well, the other thing I sometimes do to gauge the legitimacy of stuff, Mike, is bring it up to people who are informed and see how hard they push back on it. Because back in the days you're talking about, if you brought that up to serious people, they would laugh at it and say, no, consider the source, et cetera, et cetera. Mm-hmm. Now you bring it up, and those same folks, they may not agree with you, but the devil is in the details of what they don't say. And the best they'll give you is, hey, you never know.
Yeah.
That's all the confirmation I need.
That's there's no doubt. And again, I would have been one of those people. I was one of those people when people would come to us with that. So-and-so in Billy County is saying it's done deal. Clemson's gone. Well, that report clearly is false. Everybody's got somebody they talk to that says something that you might want to hear and report it as fact. I know that contract is very ironclad. That much I know from people that can understand it better than I can through 2036. And that was always my way of saying, well, look, the contract's a contract. These people aren't dummies. When they made that thing out, and remember the climate at the time, Josh, and this is what people forget. Clemson and Florida State didn't just sign this because they had too much to drink the night before and they were real groggy and it was 8:15 and somebody put a sheet of paper in front of them and said, okay, whatever, we're good. They signed it in the middle of a climate where, A, they wanted their own network because the SEC and Big Ten had one,
yep.
And B, they saw the unstable universe that existed beneath their feet, and they wanted a contract that was going to assure everybody was staying in the league so the league could not fall apart. And that's what that contract was intended to do, and that's what that contract has done. What they did not anticipate was that the TV rights money for the Big Ten and the SEC was going to dwarf it in a matter of years, therefore making it a very unbalanced competitive field. So that's where we are now because of that. But that contract at the time was not as crazy as people thought it was, or that they thought it is now.
Yeah, I listen to a lot of people use the whole revisionist history, Monday morning quarterback thing, and they say, well, the ACC should have never done this. They should have never done that. Man, look, okay. I mean, you have the right to say that. No one in their right mind knew that college athletics was about to go the way it was. I'll tell you what I think really in retrospect hurt them from a mental standpoint was the SEC got, and look, I work for CBS, full disclosure, but the contract that CBS was able to get the SEC to sign was so undervalued. It ended up being so undervalued, paying them dimes on the dollar of really what their product was worth, that I think the ACC probably looked and said, okay, even if the SEC does end up signing a bigger deal down the road, how much bigger could it be than this number? Well, it turns out market value was coming for the SEC, which meant times 3 or 4 of what they were making from CBS. And so in that world, yeah, the ACC, relatively speaking, looks like they're imprisoned by their media rights deal. It's just at the time, I don't know who in the world could have seen that coming.
No, I mean, we never know how the market landscape is going to change. It constantly does, and TV rights keep going up every year, which is why the new trend is to sign shorter deals, right? Like there's never going to be another 20-year contract, I don't believe, in any sport. He is Josh Pate of the Late Kick. Mike and JC with you here on JC and Morgan Chat Row. We got Micah, and Micah asked this on another show, and I want to throw this your way. By the way, we both have TV employers, so full disclosure. But you just touched on TV. He says, ask Josh about his thoughts on TV. He's not a big fan of some recent decisions in college football, especially about the TV money.
Well, the first thing I think is, look, so I've got very broad-based thoughts on this. I don't call this the football business. When I talk to coaches, I always have fun with them on this. I ask them, what business do you think you're in? And they'll say, I'm a football coach. I'm in the football business. Well, you're really not. You're in the entertainment space. You're in the entertainment business. It is not your job on Saturday afternoon, 3rd and 2, to entertain people. It's your job to win. But in the broader scheme of things, it is the entertainment world. If it wasn't and all coaches were equal, the lacrosse coach would make the same as the football coach. But they don't, because there's a much bigger audience for football. Okay. So when we take that prism and we view all this through that prism, it makes sense how a lot of these TV and media rights deals are handled. What I hate is that it seems to be like oil and water in marrying decision-making with the foundational principles and tradition of college football. For example, I'm just going to use this as an example, but there are 1,000,001 of these. The whiteout at Penn State is a wonderful thing. I think it may be the best spectacle in college football. Okay. We've got media companies. All of us work for one that has some kind of vested interest in college athletics, and Fox or CBS or ESPN or whatnot, they pay 9 figures, sometimes over the long haul, 10 figures in media rights money to get access to these properties and to broadcast these games. And yet I don't think a lot of them understand where the inherent value comes from. To me, what sells about college football is the spirit of college football and all that entails. You can define that however you want to. You don't go and acquire the properties, but then ignore what goes into making the spirit of the game. People don't tune in on Saturdays because the athleticism on the field is superior to what they're going to see on Sunday. They tune in on Saturday because the product in many of our minds is totally different and in some cases superior to what you see on Sunday. If you ignore that and you just treat it like a studio TV product that happens to have 90,000 in the audience, you're taking some of the soul away from what ended up creating the value of the product to begin with. And then you can also have the conversation, which I know a lot of people have differing thoughts on, about things like the playoff and how that could, in my mind, adversely affect the spirit of the product of the regular season. And whether you're pro or anti-expansion, I do think it bears watching how little the decision makers in the room sometimes cared about that decision and the possible damage you do in the aggregate to that in exchange for this ATM that masquerades as a playoff, because that thing prints money for them. And absent any other context, that's really where the value and the driver and the proposition has been for the decision making.
I'll say this. I agree with you completely. I'm glad you said that. I haven't actually heard you get into it like that because sometimes I get a little busy. I don't always catch your ship, but I certainly enjoy it when I do. I've been saying that. And here's my thing, Josh. It's the playoff. I think you and I are on different planets with it, but there's a day I'll circle back to your line of thinking, I'm pretty sure, but I'm intrigued by it. I don't mind NIL. I don't really even mind the transfer portal all that much. As a roster guy, it kind of intrigues me and all that. I think I started getting really bitter about conference expansion about 6 to 9 months ago. It was very novel at the beginning. Oh, wow, Big Ten. Oh, and there was such a visceral reaction to Texas and Oklahoma joining the SEC. Now, you mentioned the spirit of the sport. There's no planet where those two schools joining the SEC did anything to hurt the spirit of the sport. We actually got rivalries back. Nobody remembers the Southwest Conference and how bitter Texas and Arkansas was for years and years and years. They played a game one time, and they called it the best game in the history of the sport. This is the biggest game ever, Arkansas and Texas. I think Lou Holtz was coaching at Arkansas at the time. Oklahoma's right there in the footprint. They're very culturally similar, football-wise, to the rest of the league. It's in a congruent state. I mean, they are, by all accounts, a great fit in the SEC. I don't think that meant the Big Ten needed to go poach the Los Angeles schools and then the two from the Northwest. I don't think that meant, the Pac-12 needed to be, after they made all that big deal about the alliance, that they were just basically sitting there stabbing little brother in the back. I think this was the straw that brought the camel's back. Stanford and Cal going to the ACC just destroyed. And I look at that and I'm like, all right, it's going to be really novel the first time Clemson goes to Cal. Right? If I were a Clemson fan, I'd be fired up. I'd book my tickets because it's so weird and different. You can ask Auburn people that went out there last year. It's quite a scene. I'm going to be fired up first time we go to Palo Alto. Over time, and I've even seen this in the SEC with their snaking schedule where people are sick of playing the same teams, sick of going to the Outback Bowl. Over time, that's going to get old quicker than anything else. For UCLA, who can't draw a nickel worth of fans, having to go to Bloomington and West Lafayette. I've driven through these places. Trust me, all across the country. And that's not even talking about the other sports. That is going to get old quick. And in Los Angeles, where you have to kind of be good to keep an audience these days, because now there is pro sports out there, I think it's going to just destroy the interest out there. And you got Rutgers. I mean, these national conferences, to me, because now you can't go play Washington State are still playing, but Washington can't go play Oregon State right down the road or something like that. The Bay Area schools aren't going to be playing Southern Cal and UCLA. Nobody's going to Arizona State. I mean, that's what made it special. The road trips, driving distance. I mean, you normally could just drive and go see your neighbor. And those are a thing of the past. And I think it's easier to care about beating your neighbor when you're not in the playoff, right? And those are the games that are going to suffer. The ones in October where, hey, we need to win 7. All right, well, crap, we got to go to Purdue. I mean, it's easier to get up for Cal. Well, 6 of my high school teammates play at Cal. Let's go. It's going to destroy it. And the same people that brought us the Real Housewives of New Jersey are making these decisions about this sport. And the college presidents who are lucky to know, most of them are lucky to know a football is not round, are just seeing dollar signs. And I understand, and Mike may disagree with you. I understand the money, and money's great, and you need money. But I think everybody, even with NIL, because if you really took the top 500 players from high school and sent them to the pros, we'd still have 90,000 in the stands at Ohio State. We still have unbelievable ratings for big games. We'd still have a great TV product and a lot of interest, okay? That's just the reality of it. Because those 500 really aren't the top 500 when you get to the draft anyway. That's beside the point. I think that at the altar of TV and big matchups, which are going to be intriguing for 3 or 4 years, we're eroding the foundation. And eventually it's going to be, who cares? Who cares? I don't care if I'm a UCLA fan, I just don't care anymore, because it's matchups I don't care about. I don't really have a chance to compete. You got to go all the way across the country. I have nothing in common. I can't sit at the bar with my buddies who's a Stanford grad, talk crap anymore. And those are all the things that made college football what it was. It was never about Alabama versus Michigan, in my opinion.
I think we're entering a political season, for example, and a lot of people are turned off by politics, but they don't necessarily know why. They can't put their finger on it sometimes. They just know they're turned off by it. Well, the reason a lot of folks are turned off by it, sometimes myself included, is because you understand that the people running for office or the people running the entire machine for the people who run for office really don't have any kind of touch of reality with what your life is about, with what day-to-day life is about outside of the Washington, D.C. bubble. So you feel disenfranchised. I think that college football fans would be very disheartened to understand how similar those worlds are. The world of politics versus the world of how these decisions are being made in college athletics. And you've got folks who couldn't tell you the mascot of Arizona State if their life depended on it, deciding the future of the Pac-12, deciding the future of the Big 12. And here's the thing that you have to be careful of is sometimes if you get emotional about it, and I tend to, your default is to speak in absolute terms of this is going to destroy this. This is going to be devastating for that. Well, sometimes it's not going to be that. It's just going to make it worse. It may not destroy it. It may make it worse. The other thing to think about is when you understand how viewership habits work and how audience patterns work, college football did not become the monster it is overnight. It was, in my lifetime, it's always been big, but it scaled and scaled and scaled to where today we've got the biggest viewership numbers ever. The most disastrous decisions that could be made in this sport could not kill viewership overnight. What happens is a diehard viewer becomes a most of the time viewer, becomes a sometimes viewer, becomes an occasional viewer, becomes a once or twice a year viewer. That doesn't happen overnight, but it does happen over the span of 10 years. And yet I've got folks making decisions knowing that they're using bad faith arguments, hoping the public is dumb enough to buy it when they say things like, well, our evidence that these decisions are good is look at ratings. Ratings have never been bigger. All that's indicative of is we've had a solid product for the past 30 or 40 years. And it's led to the crescendo of what you see right now. You could make the worst decision imaginable for college football today, everything short of canceling the game, and ratings will still be fine this fall. 5 years from now, you may see a difference. 10 years from now, you may see a difference. So I have a 50,000-foot issue, regardless of the particulars, about the people who have their hands on the wheel of the sport and how different they probably view the sport than the very audience they're counting on to be there to make the sport valuable.
All right, there's a lot to unpack there. You guys brought up a bunch of good points, and I'll just play devil's advocate on a few because you guys are pretty simpatico on everything as it pertains to where we are. First of all, where I agree, I don't like the fact that we've just gutted some of the best rivalries in the sport. I don't like the fact that the sport in many cases does not make a lick of geographical sense. I don't like the fact that clearly money is orchestrating almost every key decision in the sport. So a lot of things I don't like that I agree with both of you on. Where I would push back is, I think, Josh, your point is, the ratings are good now, but don't think that necessarily can't go away. You know, we've seen it happen in other sports. Major League Baseball used to have great ratings. It doesn't anymore, not on a national basis. It's a regional sport. So you are speaking for the fan, and I understand everything you're talking about. And if we were in an assembly hall, there'd be a standing ovation and a hear for all of that. I do think, though, and I'll stay with this, and I hope I'm not wrong. We all agree the most passionate sports fan on the planet is college football, right? I mean, NFL has greater ratings, but the most passionate, nothing can touch college football. A couple of 6 and 5 teams can play an end-of-the-year rivalry game, and you won't be able to get a ticket. And yes, there will be ratings. And yes, every fan that can't go to the game is still engaged in it, and that's what makes it unique, as opposed to like a couple of 3 and 12 NFL teams playing in week 16 before a lot of empty seats. I don't think that's going anywhere. The passion of college football fans, I do think they'll speak with their attendance. Some of them are just getting priced out regardless. Sure. Even if we didn't do any of this realignment stuff, the ticket prices were going up 10 years ago. I mean, I was hearing it from fans 10 years ago. Mike, I'm getting priced out. Like, I can't do this anymore. I'm just got to watch it on TV. But that doesn't mean they don't care. That doesn't mean they don't still love their team. Their favorite team and their love of college football in those 12 Saturdays every fall. I've said this before. I think college football, as poorly as it's been run for about a century, is like Teflon. We love the game so much that no matter how hard you try and screw it up, I just don't think the interest is going away. The other thing I would say is, I mean, UCLA's got 50,000 empty seats at home, regardless of what conference they're in. There's third world problems, and then there's first world problems. The SEC doesn't have any of these problems. The SEC, what has the SEC really lost here in the equation? Like, the Iron Bowl is still a huge deal. The Tennessee-Alabama game is still a huge deal. People were reluctant to accept Texas A&M and Missouri. I think they have. I think Texas and Oklahoma are going to fit in very easily and very smoothly right off the bat. So I agree with you on all the things you're saying that I don't like, because, I mean, I'm with you. I don't like a lot of it either, but I do think that sport is still pretty doggone healthy, and I do think the problems of the Pac and the problems of the ACC are not analogous to the problems of the SEC, which is still, in my opinion, extremely healthy.
So, first off, I would hope you're right about that. I'd be happy to be wrong here. The thing I would say is many things make college football different than the NFL. In my lifetime, and prior to my lifetime, one of the things that's been different is the selling point of the spirit of the sport that I mentioned has also included not having a hyper focus on postseason inclusion as the end-all be-all barometer of relevance. In the NFL, if you're out of the playoff race, you're out of everything that matters in that year. Up until about 10 years ago, if South Carolina faces Clemson on the last Saturday of the fall, and each of them are struggling to get to 8 wins, there is a world where you entered the season understanding, hey, make a bowl game. That'd be good in this given year. Like, in other words, there were tiers of expectation, and they made sense because everyone understood there's a gulf in resource and have not in this sport. It doesn't make sense for everyone to make their goal to be to win national championship or to make, a playoff or whatever. Over the past decade, as the attention shifted and as the money shifted and as the construction of the playoff became the primary focus of the powers that be, the spotlight also shifted, and the marketing mechanism in the sport also shifted. And it was who's in, who's in, who's in. And now all focus has been placed on playoff to the point where you've got phrases like meaningless game in November. Meaningless bowl game has long since become a thing, but meaningless game in November that has kind of, I think, been baked into and toxified the kettle a little bit, that now you don't have the same thought that you would have had in 08 and 09. NC State fans, in once upon a time, understood, hey, man, if we're playing this Saturday to get to 9 wins, that's a big game. Not only that, not only did the endemic audience understand that, but the national or regional audience understood that this game has some implications on it. Today's world would lead you to believe, or a lot of big voices in today's world would lead you to believe, if there's not playoff implication on the line, it's a meaningless game. With that being the baseline, with that being the default moving forward, my great unknown, Mike, is how that impacts the prism of spirit of sports, of spirit of college football, through which this thing used to get viewed, and how it's not viewed by a lot of people anymore. And I can tell you this, like, I filter through audience traffic and commentary on my own channel, and I can see comments against age. And I got a 55-year-old guy who lives in Sheboygan, Wisconsin, or Illinois, whichever state that's in. They don't mind talking about a game just as the game. The younger audience, through no fault of their own, has been trained to think solely in terms of playoff, playoff, playoff. And if there's not playoff on the line for this team or this game, it's meaningless. It's not their fault. That's what they've been preached over the past 10 years. So then moving forward over the next 10 years, I wonder to myself, all the emphasis has been placed on that playoff, but most of these teams have no shot at a playoff, and there is a growing divide between have and have not. And the SEC has fortified itself. The Big Ten has fortified itself at the expense of the rest of the country. So what have you done? Have you truly created a monster in the SEC so big that it's a mini NFL and its numbers are big coast to coast just because of the brand? Ditto for the Big Ten. Or have you taken an entire portion of the country essentially, with very few exceptions, west of Austin, and deemed it totally irrelevant in the college football landscape outside of LA, conditionally, and Eugene, Oregon, and maybe Seattle. That's my concern. This sport should never be a regional sport. This sport should always have a national footprint, even if some regions are more hardcore and serious about it. And that would be my concern.
And that's the magic of the sport too. Is that what I've always said is this: like college football can exist on a magical level everywhere from. And I've been to where the Coliseum is in LA. Have you been there, Josh?
I have not had a chance to go there.
That neighborhood is decidedly different than Starkville, Mississippi, or Ann Arbor is a lot different than Knoxville, Tennessee, a mid-sized city. I mean, Athens is a lot different than Coral Gables or Fort Lauderdale, where they play now, the Orange Bowl. I mean, and that's what's been magical about the sport. I think you go across our country, it can exist everywhere. And I think whenever you get to like you guys said, the gaps between the haves and have-nots, and it becomes geographical, where, like you said, everything west of whatever, and west of Texas is like irrelevant with you, except for you four schools. We have the Seattle, we have Nike, we have Southern Cal, and then the other guys, and that's it. But it does. I mean, does nobody understand? BYU fans are some of those passionate on the planet. Same with Utah, right? You just don't walk into Rice-Eccles Stadium and win in Salt Lake City. Do people not understand that for years coaches have considered Arizona State the top sleeping giant program in America? Because not only is it in downtown Phoenix with a lot of talent on campus, their fans are very passionate. There's a ton of them, a ton of Sun Devils out there. Nobody understood that. They just kind of looked at numbers and said that. Now look, this is not a doomsday prophecy. I think, as with all things, you almost look at it and go, and I'll ask you this, the Super League concept, right? Chip Kelly actually, I thought, had the best idea, because at this point, instead of living with bi-coastal conferences, why not just make it one big thing? And then you sort of go back to the future, Josh. If you did have 64 and you divided those into 8 divisions, I think, see if I'm wrong, we get some of that magic back, because neighbors are playing neighbors again. Rivalries can come back. You have schedule flexibility to where you can schedule some interesting non-conference games all you want for ratings, but the actual what matters, playing for what matters, conference titles, all that kind of comes back home. Your thoughts on that? Have we jumped the shark enough to where an actual super league of 64 divided into regional divisions would actually help the sport and the spirit of the sport, like you said?
I remember when he came out with that, and I remember the next show we talked about it, and I wanted to do what Mike just did. I wanted to play devil's advocate a little bit, because a lot of what he said made sense, almost too much sense in some cases. Almost your default is, well, that will never work in college. It makes too much sense. But the other thing to keep in mind, just to apply practicality to it, is understanding how disjointed the business of college athletics are and is. Therefore, how many different leagues have how many different interests at mind, and how many different TV deals are they? And they're not all aligned. So where's the great reset button? For any of these great ideas, mine included, for any of these great ideas to ever be executed, you'd have to have people who don't have a great track record of working together, work together. And you'd have to have, frankly, conferences like the SEC and the Big Ten probably step up and say, yes, we have this power. We're going to voluntarily cede a portion of it, even though it's unprecedented in college athletics. That is not the climate we've ever created here. We're going to do it for what? And this is an unfamiliar phrase, so folks, sit back in your chair for this, for the betterment of the sport overall. Yeah, I know. I understand. Say it 5 times and you'll get used to it. I would love to picture a world, whatever the new setup is, where that's at the forefront of the decision-making.
Absolutely.
I would love that. I am very skeptical that you'd ever see it happen.
It would take the courts and Congress, just like with NIL. You would have to sue them. The student athletes would have to sue the institutions and the conferences because 98% of all these schools are federally funded and state government entities. You'd have to sue and say the government. I mean, this is what the government is doing to us. They're causing us to travel all over. It's unfair. Blah blah blah. It's hard to do that with NIL and stuff. While they're getting paid, right? But for the good, it would have to go. You'd have to almost legally do it. And anytime you start talking about Congress doing anything, it's not going to happen, because you're right. Those egos are so massive, and the power grab. We've gone beyond the fact that, oh, I'm just going to kind of add this piece here, and now it's on. You have haves and have-nots, and the power hunger is like Ralphie Ray got RIP at a pizza buffet. I mean, it's on. I mean, everybody wants to control it. I mean, the Zions on controlling the whole thing. So you'd almost have to have the government step in to do it, and that's a shame. But yeah, I don't expect any of the current deciders to do anything that we all think is in the best interest of the sport.
All right. So on this, I'm not even going to need to play devil's advocate. I'm just going to tell you, the genie's out of the bottle. We're not going back. So we can argue about how much we don't like it. We're not going back. And JC and I have talked about for years. It's been a cabal in college football for a while. And really, before we were born, before we were a zygote, I mean, college football was dominated by the same amount of programs. It's fluctuated a little bit, but not a whole lot if you really look at the history of national championships in the sport. So I agree with everything of what I want. Your wish list and my wish list are very much the same, but this is not changing. Well, if last year's playoff, and by the way, I think Pat asked a question, when are we getting to 16? I think we all agree that's going to happen, right? We know it's going to go 12 to 14. You think they're going to stop there when they realize how much cash it would be to go to 16? Why would they, right? But so last year's, if we had a 12-team playoff last year, you'd have Bama, Texas, Georgia, Mizzou, Ole Miss, Michigan, Washington, Ohio State, Oregon, Penn State. Liberty fits in there somewhere. But the first 10 that I mentioned, 5 SEC, 5 Big Ten. And I'm afraid to tell folks that are fans of the other schools and the other leagues, which goes back to the Florida State-Clemson conversation, I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. I mean, I think those two leagues are going to dominate the playoff and the playoff discussion. And you're either in those leagues and you're got a fighting chance for it, or you're out and you're really swimming upstream. I just don't see that changing anytime soon.
This was the great fleece job. Okay, I'm a big believer. If you fundamentalize all this, a long time ago, people looked at college football and they said, wow, these folks are really passionate about this thing, but it's not maximized from a revenue perspective. They don't even have a playoff. They could get so much more money out of it. Or we could step in, put in the suits, and we could get so much more money out of it. But we need to convince those people. We need the fans, those passionate fans. We need them to be on board. We can't have them revolting as we try and take over their sport. So what do? We need to manipulate them into being our PR machine. And so we need to convince them that their model is broken. And we need to convince them the answer to their model is our ATM. But we can't call it an ATM because that will make us look money hungry. So let's call it a playoff. And let's sell them on the fact that they need it. Okay, people went along with it. I did too. 4 teams is not that many. So we went along with it. Sorry about that. Clap like a seal, and we get the 4 teams. All right, then the 4 teams were around for a little while. Then more people looked and said, hey, this 4-team playoff's making a lot of money. What would an 8-teamer do? And then someone else said, 8? Let's go to 12. And like you said, we'll go to 16. We'll go beyond 12. But what happened, Mike, what happened, JC, was they looked around and they realized, how do we get them to do it again for us? Well, it looks like their biggest complaint is the same teams are making the playoff. And it looks like the biggest complaint, if we're reading the room right, is it's really SEC heavy. It's really tilted towards the big boys, which is good because that makes us a lot of money. However, we need to fool them into thinking access and inclusion is the key. And the only way to get that, the only way for them to get a shot at the table is more seats at the table. Mm-hmm. So that's what they preached, access, inclusion. And surely if we expand it to 12, then all of a sudden the little guy will have a seat at the table. And I had a question on last night's show. Someone said, what happens if there are 2 undefeated G5 teams? And I said, choose which one's going to be in the playoff. And they said, well, you can't leave an undefeated G5 team out of the playoff. And I said, if you honestly think they expanded this thing to give you more room to sit at that table, you are crazy. And the first time a second G5 team works its way into that room, they will change the construct of the room. This is built for them to have a bigger party. It's not built for you. You got sold on it. You got fooled into thinking that, so you'd be on board and support it. So they had public interest on their side. This was never about anything other than deepening the pockets of the folks who really drive the bus at the end of the day. And look, I don't even say that demonizing them. I understand the way the world works. It's not a fairy tale. I divorced myself a long time ago from making the postseason of college football what my interest revolves around. It's Saturday in the fall for me. So whatever happens at the end of the road is whatever happens at the end of the road. But most people aren't like that. Most people do train their eyes on what's coming, the playoff, what's coming. And what's coming is what you just said. What's coming is I'd put your over-under on SEC teams in the playoff this December at 5 or 5.5. Big Ten at 3 or 4.5 or something like that. And if there's a spot for the rest of you, we'll slide you in. They tossed them that loaf of bread in the form of an auto bid. I don't even know that will be maintained in the next round of this.
Get a Group 5 playoff, baby. We need it.
Conclusion are look. Here's what I'd love. What I'd love in the next round is the SEC. If we're going to be as big as 16 or maybe 20 teams, I would love to reverse engineer the postseason and have a quarterfinal, semifinal, championship format inside these conferences and let the conference have its own internal playoff, then spit out your champion for whatever national playoff you want to have. At that point, if it's going to be an SEC heavy and a Big Ten heavy deal anyway, why not bake in the playoff into your conference format? That way, at least your conference title games maintain their sanctity. Because right now, we're going to get to December, and you mark my words, some fan base somewhere is going to look at it and read the room and do the math and say, could it actually be better for us just not to go to Indy, not to go to Atlanta, lock down the 5 seed, draw the G5 team in the first round, draw the lowest ranked conference champ in the second round, and have a home playoff game in the process? Like, what sense does that make?
I do think that is a huge issue. I'm glad you mentioned that. And we all know the SEC championship game. It's the only one that sells out before we even know the matchup, makes money, gets great ratings, and it's a big deal. Like, it's a big deal to say you're the SEC champion. And I am concerned about that. I will totally say that. This is just, again, I'm going to be, can't believe I'm doing this. Like, sometimes I'm accused of being the pessimist or the cynic, but I'm gonna do one little positive spin on the expanded playoff, because I know it's not for everybody. I was for it. I thought it would go to 8. I didn't think we'd ever wind up. I won't say ever. I wasn't ready for 14.
You thought it would take at least 4 years, didn't you?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, I wasn't like, wait a minute. We just, what just happened here? But it does make, for all the negatives, which you stated very eloquently, and I'm not about, it's all about inclusion. To me, it's all about, there will be some more relevant games in terms of team. It used to be, unless you were like Saban's LSU 2-loss team, the second loss was like a death sentence.
Right.
Like, your national championship hopes were done. And then sometimes they were done in like week 6. That's not the case anymore. So, I mean, there's going to be a lot of games in November now that we weren't overly excited about, that our favorite team is not playing, but damn, I know what's on the line. I'm actually into this game. So, I mean, we have to look at both sides of it. I do think there are some positives about adding teams to the playoff, where once you go 2 losses, you're no longer out of it. There's going to be several 2-loss teams in a 12, 14-team playoff.
I think in the short term, you're right. Here, another great unknown here. I don't pretend to have all the answers of the American college football fan psychology, but one of the things I wonder is, outside of the NCAA basketball tournament, where it really does mean something to get into the tournament for people who know they have no shot of winning it. Outside of that, literally every other postseason format in major American sport is ultimately based on crowning a champion. It is really the inclusion in it, the baked-in value of making the playoff is about having a shot to win a national championship. And that will sell in the short term. inevitably, the three of us and most sane people watching will understand that we will come to know that the 8, 9, 10 seed, unless it's like a wayward Texas or Georgia, will have no shot at winning this thing. In the short term, that won't matter. In the longer term, once your mind gets retrained to understand those 10, 11, 12 seeds have no shot, then I wonder moving forward if playoff implications mean the same thing down the road that they mean right now. If you play a game with playoff implications on the line right now or over the next couple of years, you're sold out. Everyone's tuned in. It's a huge deal. But if we're watching 8-2 Iowa State against 7-3 Kansas State, and we're saying, boy, this is big because maybe the 11 seed could be on the line. But then your mind tells you it doesn't matter. Whoever wins this is going to face Georgia in the first round or second round, get knocked out by 30. I wonder if that has the same value. And the other thing about that, Mike, and this to me is the bigger point, I should have led with it. If at the end of the day, we value this thing because it's the mechanism we use to crown a national champ, then I really wonder if we're removing the urgency on the games that feature the teams actually capable of winning a title. Ohio State, Michigan, Georgia versus Alabama, Texas versus Ole Miss. You just build a giant safety net under the games that feature teams that you think could go the distance to manufacture some meaning on games that feature teams that you know have little to no shot of going the distance. And in the aggregate, that trade-off has never made sense to me.
That has always been the legitimate downside to playoff expansion, is that you're going to take away some of the meaningfulness of some of those great regular season games. You're 100% right, and I acknowledge that. Like, if there's two heavyweights that you pretty much know are going to make the playoff anyway, we're playing for seeding at that point, there's no question. I mean, the beauty of college football, what made it unique, was that every regular season game could train wreck your season if you lose. The fear of that it's unlike anything else. That's gone. I mean, I totally can see that it's gone. So now that we know it's gone, I just want to see if we can make the best of it. I hope we get a Group 5 playoff. Who is it? An Evil Budgie? Nice nickname. One of our listeners. If you like old school college football, I'd pick up an FCS team to root for on the side. I can tell you, I broadcasted many of those FCS playoff games.
Are those
some of the
great?
best?
Yeah.
It's one of my favorite things to do. It is the purest form we have left of college football. So that's not going away. I think a Group 5 playoff, we should get to that point, because just throwing one in there as a 12 seed is not giving us is not really doing a whole lot other than a one big paycheck for the Group 5. But I'm all for that. One quick one, Josh, just on your way out, because I know we've kept you long, because it's always great conversation when we have you on. I'm assuming you're going to SEC Media Days.
I will be there, yes.
Are you going to have your own room with the coaches, like you, TV, radio, Josh Pate room? How does that work?
I don't think we're doing that. I think I'm going to personally treat SEC Media Days a little different this year. I'm going to be all over the place. And so I know we're doing that at Big Ten, because we just picked up the Big Ten contract. So, I mean, we got to treat that
cool.
like the end all be all. Not that it's not, but I think SEC I'll handle a little bit different this year.
Is there
I'm
any
not going to be able to
storyline?
handle the theme song with the Big Ten.
I tried. Look, trust me.
I mean,
I have thrown every ounce of weight I can around this place. And I've banged on the door, and the people who control the music to college football and CBS, they do not give the combination to that door. I can't get in. I can't even get.
They're
someone
not coming off of
answer
it. Man.
me.
Just sell it to Disney, man. Disney buys everything else. Just have them buy it anyway.
Just in closing, what are you looking for? We know what media days are. I mean, we've been to a bunch of these things. Not a whole lot of hard news comes out of there. But what intrigues you the most? Like, as you're scouring Dallas, what are you on the hunt for?
I'm interested to hear Brent Venables. I mean, has there been a more disrespected team than Oklahoma? Oklahoma has dominated the Texas series over the past several years. They beat them last year. They've recruited at a very comparable fashion to Texas. They have used the portal very well, and they are a total afterthought right now. And people are ready to coronate Texas, and I got no problem with that. But man, Oklahoma has been written off. And I don't think Brent Venables, if he tried, could write a better script to motivate his organization. I mean, those folks have a rock-solid model. They've got a rock-solid program there. And the other thing to keep in mind is, while the rest of the country may not be sold on Venables yet, they just extended him. So internally, Oklahoma is saying, we've seen everything we need to see. We've got our guy. And this is a place that has nailed coaching decisions. This millennium, if you're 25 years old, you've never known Oklahoma to be unstable at their head coaching position. They've had Stoops forever. Then they had Riley, and he killed it there. And now they've got Brent Venables. And while you may not be sold on him, they are. So I'm looking forward to that. Also, this dynamic in the state of Alabama, where Auburn had to live under the shadow of Nick Saban forever. Then they get Hugh Freeze in there, who starts to resurrect the program. And then they get what they think is the added blessing of Nick Saban just retired. Oh, they hired a guy from the Pacific Northwest who's never been down here, much less recruited down here. This is our shot. And then all of a sudden, Bama is killing it in recruiting. And spoiler alert, may have some big news coming today on that front. And Auburn fans have to be looking around saying, hold on, like, we convinced ourselves they were going to drop off after Saban. We just had to make it through Saban and they were going to drop off. So I'm interested to hear, it's not that the fans are going to speak, but I'm interested to hear Hugh Freeze. Billy Napier is its own story because I was down there. We did a whole show. They gave me, I swear to you guys, I've never had access like Florida gave me last month. Sat in their recruiting meetings in their war room. Didn't even take my cell phone, Shurburtt. I could have just taken a picture of the big board. And so I say that to say, operationally, Florida feels like Georgia. They feel like Alabama. Inside the walls, you would be shocked at how similar those places are operating. But then you look at the records and the results aren't there, which either means there's a disconnect on Saturdays, or maybe the results are just coming a little downstream of having to overturn the program. And I know that schedule looks the way it does this year. I'm just saying everybody doubts Florida externally. Internally, it's like they're on the moon. The attitude inside the program doesn't even acknowledge the outside, which is the way it should be. But like the difference in how Napier's perceived versus the way I'm sure he'll sound at Media Day, that'll be fun to listen to as well.
Yeah, I mean, you just hit on three things that I think are all fascinating. Sam Pittman in a different ways. Kind of the Sam Pittman, I should say, the Sam Pittman Bobby Petrino story is fascinating when you make it a combo platter. Go ahead, JC. We'll sneak one more in.
Yeah, and I mean, this is a discussion for another day. I don't think that Alabama and Georgia works at Florida. I just don't. I think that program's very unique. And if you look at who's won there.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Through the years and who hasn't, Georgia, yes. Georgia, we've seen that with Kirby Smart. So it'll be interesting to see what happens, because I think if he has a winning record this year, Florida is on the up and up.
Yeah, that's all it takes.
You're right about that. And
I think they want to keep him. I think they want to.
You can't keep changing coaches.
No, you can't do that. And look, the AD that hired him, you know how it is. When you're an AD, if you hire somebody, it's your signature hire. You don't want to have to fire a second football coach during your tenure. From what I understand, they're giving him more and more resources that they've ever had there. At the end of the day, coaching is coaching, and it's important. But you got to have the Jimmies and the Joes. They're trying to reel them in there into games.
I'll eat my words if he wins 7 this year, which he could. I mean, Graham Mertz is kind of underrated, and we'll see. That's fascinating. That first game is very important, I think.
For
man,
both teams,
because you want to talk about underachievers. The underachiever university's coming to the swamp.
Let's not talk about Mario Cristobal like everything is going to be just glorious if he loses week 1 in the swamp. And giving away a game to Georgia Tech last year because you don't take a knee. I mean, all these expectations for the U could easily go sour in a matter of 3.5 hours on August 31st.
Two really good coaches there too. Those two. I mean, before they took
those jobs.
Look at the biggest Napier and Cristobal fan on earth here.
Yeah. Josh, we love having you. You always bring it. You didn't go white schmedium today. You went Virginia Tech Hokie.
Support the ACC, guys.
Look at that.
Support the ACC.
Where's the SMU Cal love? Are you going to bring a Cal jersey to the next time we have you on?
I just did a load of laundry, and it's in the dryer right now.
Take that Marshawn Lynch jersey out and get it ready for the next cameo here on JC and Morgan. In all seriousness, go ahead and crush it at Media Days. Know you will, and we look forward to having you back on. And as always, you make Columbus GA proud, baby.
I appreciate it, guys.
All right. Thanks, you, Josh. He is Josh Pate, and you can follow him and you can listen to him 3 days a week now. That show runs on YouTube, and he's killing it with that. JC has been telling me about him for years, and swore one day that Josh would his talents would be utilized in bigger and better venues. JC, the kingmaker that he is, was a prophet, and the rest is history.
Yeah, he's really good. Like he and I are like-minded. We don't agree on everything, but like I said, like-minded. And I appreciate the way he speaks about the sport. It's kind of like our show. It's not cookie cutter.
Not at all.
I mean, you can go see even good voices. You can listen to them 4 or 5 different times. They start to kind of run together.
Right.
And that's really what I like about all our guests. But Josh is just a unique voice with how his mind processes the sport and spits out his opinions and theories and things like that. He's like a beautiful mind.
A beautiful mind. Another beautiful mind is the man on the right side of the screen for those watching on YouTube. It's JC Shurburtt, the JC5 rapid paced, no huddle. We're going tempo when we come back on the other side.
We got started in 1979. Because we're a manufacturer, we're able to control our costs. That's why we like to manufacture as much of the product as we can, because in our factory stores we can offer a competitive edge over other people around the country. When people come into one of our Palm Casuals, it's like they're buying their car at Detroit. They're going right to the factory and buying their car.
30-day money-back guarantee. That's a big deal with us. I mean, we give 30 days to do anything. I mean, return it, change it, get a different color, get your money back.
When you pull into a store and it says Palm Casual, you know you're at a factory store.
Rescues and Resin, proud supporters of Carolina Rise. They are also proud partners of the show. They make products you can't get anywhere else. Custom designed wood and resin products that make your tailgate, make your home, or make anything stand out. Order a custom cutting board, coasters, wall art, tables, and more. Contact Dustin and Tabitha at rescuesandresin.com today. rescuesandresin.com, and put your imagination to work. Rescues and Resin, proud partners of Inside the Gamecocks, the show.
Listen up. This is for construction professionals, contractors, facility managers, or do-it-yourself homeowners. SitePro Rentals is ready to equip your upcoming project. We rent construction equipment for any size job. Boom and scissor lifts, telehandlers, skid steers, excavators, air compressors, generators, even small tools and equipment. SitePro has you covered. If you are ready for better equipment rental, call SitePro and rent from the local, friendly, easy to do business with equipment professionals. Call 972-RENT-NOW. That's 972-736-8669 to rent the newest equipment in the Atlanta market. Call 972-RENT-NOW or visit siteprorentals.com.
We're passionate about making sure that the Nest and Wild mattress is the best it can be. Made well and made right. Right here in Tupelo, Mississippi. So how can we do all that? Work. Hard work. And that means something. The Nest and Wild mattress is a movement. It's a pride in where you come from and where you're going. So get comfortable, because this movement is just beginning.
Yes, JC and Morgan rolls on, brought to you in part by SitePro Rentals. I know we've got a lot of construction pros, contractors that listen. Certainly, this can apply to them. This can apply to you. When renting equipment, important to have a local, easy-to-do business with friend in the industry who carries the newest equipment and creates efficiency for you and your project job site. If you want to do work with easy-to-do business pros and are ready for better equipment rental, call our friends at Site Pro Rentals. That's 972-RENT-NOW, 972-736-8669 for better equipment rental. A lot of great responses there in the chat box, and also producer Phil Molinax might have had the line of the day. It's going to feel awkward when people are talking about the Vanderbilt game as a quad 4 win opportunity. Nice one, Phil. Nice one. Yeah, and everything we talked about, it cuts right to the heart of so many things. So you got some visceral reactions from fans. Like, Mike, I understand where you're coming from, bud. I totally do. Like I said, I agree with just about everything JC and Josh talked about. I just don't think it's changing, one. And I'm trying to find positives with it. And there are positives. Some of you might have liked the BCS. I thought it was a joke. Inevitably, like a John Saunders will go on the air and defend it. Well, it worked out because one play two, according to whom? According to 7 computer polls? I mean, you look back at those matchups, it wasn't always 1 versus 2. Before that, we had split national championships. We had the Billingsley poll declaring a national. I mean, it was an absolute mess. But college football, again, Teflon, it's such a good product, and we love it so much that it still grew in popularity. And I don't think that popularity is going anywhere. Again, I could be wrong, but I don't see it. People will complain, and they'll be upset about certain things. And you know what will be the bottom line, JC? When their team is winning, none of it will matter. And when they're losing, they're going to be pissed regardless. So that's the other thing about college football fans. Their number one thing is all about their team. They love to watch other games, but they love their team, and that passion I don't think is going away anytime soon. My passion for the JC5 begins right now.
It's time for the top topics in the sport. We bring the JC5. Number 1.
All right, going to talk academic schools. This is always a fun topic. Stanford joining the ACC is one of those moves I don't like. It's weird to me. And I started digging into Stanford football, because they don't have a very large fan base. It's a private school, one of the best schools in the country. Yet when you kind of dig in to Stanford, they have tradition and a winning tradition. And this is a good football. This is one of the better historically good football programs in the ACC. It's not like Syracuse. We had Jim Brown, then Donovan McNabb, and then not much. That Quadri Ishmael era or whatever. They've been really solid through the years. John Elway played at Stanford. Jim Plunkett played at Stanford.
Andrew
Luck played at Stanford. Richard Sherman played at Stanford. Bill Walsh coached at Stanford twice. Dennis Green coached at Stanford. It goes on and on. This tradition, Pop Warner, Mike. Warner coached at Stanford.
Pop Warner.
The first coach at Stanford football history. So they've been winning games out in Palo Alto for a long time. 37 consensus All-Americans. 15 conference championships. 2 national championships claimed, 1926, 1940.
Billingsley.
Established rivalries with the likes of Notre Dame and SC and Cal. The band is on the field. Who will ever forget that? That was a loss, but who will ever forget that? They're part of the spirit of college football. And it's not like they're just like this cute little story. I'll get to, I wouldn't say a cute little story, but a good story later. They're one of the more successful programs out west through the years. Stanford has history and tradition. They had a Super Bowl in Palo Alto one time. Going to the ACC and the struggles they've had lately, and you've documented this, they've kind of struggled in the NIL era. The coach they had, I guess they were always talking about him going to the NFL, and then he never did. David Shaw, he's out. The guy they've got's a good coach, Troy Taylor. He won at Sac State, right? That's a tough place to win. Going in the ACC now, so it's the wild. I think they're about to go into not the abyss like UCLA, but kind of in the wilderness for a while. Those West Coast teams in the ACC are going to surprise some teams just because of travel sometimes. But for the most part, I don't like their chances in the new league. So I look closer to home here, Northwestern. Although they are kind of playing in on a practice field this year. They're playing home games. It looks like a tennis setup, like on Lake Michigan. They're building a beautiful new stadium that looks like a miniature Mercedes-Benz almost without the dome. I mean, it's going to be one of the nicest stadiums in college football. It puts Baylor's to shame, by the way. Baylor just built a nice new stadium. We thought when Pat Fitzgerald got fired, their little nice story was over. They won 8 games last year and almost won the division.
One of the best coaching jobs in the country that guy did.
David Braun. Northwestern's been pretty good for a while. They have their years where they dip. So my question to you is, when we talk about Northwestern, Duke, Vandy, Stanford, the big four, has Northwestern overtaken Stanford during the last 10 years or so, as far as the premier quote unquote academic school that also plays football? Because Stanford was on top for a while, but has Northwestern overtaken them in your eyes, given all the changes out west?
I don't need much time to answer that. Yes. And I would add Duke has too. Now they lost Elko and Riley Leonard, so maybe they take a major step back this year, but
didn't make a super hire either. I don't think. Betty Diaz.
Don't
go to that well. Anyway, go ahead.
No, I think absolutely. It's the first time I've heard that question kind of thrown out there, and I say yes. And you remember, I was a David Shaw guy. Like, I was buying stock on David Shaw, and then once Andrew Luck left, and once his litany of NFL tight ends left, it was like, whoa! It just cratered, and it cratered fast. I've been to Palo Alto. It's a beautiful, beautiful place. It's laid back. It's chill. The weather's always nice. The campus is phenomenal. Like, there's so many good things there, but it's just like a lot of other California things, man. It's not college football centric. And like somebody brought up, well, UCLA used to fill up. You brought up this, JC, maybe it was last week. The population of California is dramatically changing. People are migrating out of there, and very few people can afford to live there. And then you look at what's going on in California. This is not 1980s California anymore. And so I've been there a number of times the last few years to call NFL games. And I always talk about this. It's amazing how little attention, because I usually get in on a Saturday for the game on Sunday, and I tune into sports radio and I listen and I check out a sports bar, and nothing. They don't care. They do not care. And the moment the NFL came back to LA, Southern Cal was no longer that city's pro team with Pete Carroll. So I think Stanford's swimming upstream. I think the ACC is not necessarily going to do them any good. And yes, to answer your question, in tempo fashion, Northwestern I would put ahead of them.
And Northwestern's also going to have Big Ten money, and that new stadium is going to help them. It's going to seat about 35,000 instead of they were about like 55 with their
in Chicago. Like,
you get a lot of like it's like, and people don't understand this either. Duke, Northwestern, Vandy, Stanford, they all kind of compete against each other because there's a finite amount of football talent out there across the country that will come to your school and play. At Stanford, with their history putting guys in the NFL, was awfully popular and all that. I mean, I've talked to coaches that have coached at both Vandy and Stanford and Duke, and they all kind of look over the fence and see what all 4 of them are doing. So that is kind of a rivalry, and then they all hate Notre Dame because Notre Dame typically gets all those academic guys because they're Notre Dame. So they all kind of look up at Notre Dame, but there's a while there Stanford would go head to head with Notre Dame and get players even out of the Midwest when David Shaw was there. So it's pretty interesting to see. All right, on to number 2, rapid fire.
Number 2.
All right. We've been talking about who the heck's going to win the Big 12, and I got a theory I posed to you. Iowa State Cyclones, Matt Campbell, about 6-7 years ago, was the hottest name. He turned down some NFL gigs. His name was on every list for every big job. The Cyclones cycled up. 2020 was kind of a pinnacle. Kind of cycled back down. Brock Purdy, now in the NFL. But they kind of cycled up last year against the odds, Mike. They got back, I think, around 500, pulled some upsets, really good on defense. 17 starters back this year in no Texas, no Oklahoma. your thoughts about the Cyclones maybe being a sleeper in the new Big 12.
About time for Matt Campbell to have a 2.0 version. Was 1.0 was smoking hot. One of the hottest candidates. NFL was looking at him. Every major college that had an opening was looking at him. And then Ames, Iowa reality hit him. And I'll say this, like, I love what Iowa State, I love their passion. The tailgating, if you've ever been to a game there at it was like Jack Trice Stadium. They got all the tents outside, and it doesn't matter if it's windy or crappy weather, which sometimes it certainly is. They're all in. Like there's no apathy for college football at Iowa State, even though many people associate them more with basketball because they've had more success there. So it's about time for Campbell to have a reboot and get it back to where it was. I think the Big 12 is the most compelling league in terms of the amount of teams that can actually win it. There's only so many in the SEC and Big 10 that can actually win it. There's only so many in the ACC that can actually win it. The Big 12, you could probably make a case for a handful if you wanted. And I think Iowa State's one of those handful. So, yes, I think Iowa State, they hit their valley. Now all the talk and hoopla about Matt Campbell leaving for a better job, I mean, that's still on the table, but I don't hear it as much. So it's less of a distraction. I'm bullish on the Cyclones, and I love their fan base.
Me too.
Number 3.
Just to add, Matt Campbell's 8 years in Ames, 6 winnings, only 2 losing seasons. I'd be curious to see if anybody else has ever come close to that. 87-63 overall as a head coach, including 35-15 at Toledo, and he's only 44 years old. So we'll talk later about this when the coaching carousel heats up. But if you do bounce back and win in Ames this year, you're only 45. SEC comes calling, Arkansas, somebody like that. I don't know. All right, number 3.
Number 3.
And we mentioned this on ITG, but I'm going to throw it out to the national audience because we have some listeners in Texas. The Big 10 calls A&M. They picking up the phone, listening.
All right.
Given the circumstances.
We got in this the other day, and I've seen it talked about. That is, to me, the ultimate cut off your nose to spite your face move. Like you're PO'd about something, and you want to do something rash, and you're not thinking it through, and so you immediately do something that you think is going to make you feel better, and you think is going to kind of, basically a blank you to a league that you thought should never invite Texas. I wouldn't go there, man. I wouldn't go there. Like, if you've been to College Station and you know that fan base, you know the culture of the program, they are where they belong. They fit in the SEC. I just don't see the advantages of going to the Big 10. Number 3.
Number 4.
Or 4.
Okay. Wisconsin plays Alabama at Camp Randall Stadium, and I kind of think this game this year is going to finally give Wisconsin the credit it's due. Like they've been winning for a while, no matter who the coach. I mean, heck, they fired a coach with a winning record in Paul Christ, who was an alum. Luke Fickell's there now, kind of an adjustment period last year, but overall, Mike, since Barry Alvarez came to Wisconsin, they've been really good. And I'm just gonna read this off to you and see what you think. And the question is, are they the most disrespected good program in the country? All right. They're in a state that produces less than 5 Division I players annually. It's a high academic institution, hard to get into. But they have a rockin' loyal fan base, just like the Packers. I mean, they fill up their stadium all the time. Somehow they win 10-plus games a year by outworking opponents and have, no matter who the coach has been. It's the only place where the offensive linemen get treated like rock stars. They have a stingy defense, a big-time in-state walk-on program similar to what Tom Osborne had at Nebraska. And they pound the rock. Even Phil Longo and his spread offense runs it quite a bit. Do we downplay Wisconsin? In our minds, when they win and go to Indianapolis or whatever, is it just a down year for the big boys in the Big 10 in our minds? Or is Wisconsin probably one of, if not one of the most disrespected programs in the country?
I think for a while you could make that case, because why? So much of it is brand, like brand of football, I should say, not brand like school brand. People just don't like the 2,000-yard rushing team like they used to, right? But that's all ancient history. Phil Longo's your OC. You got a passing quarterback. You've got a coach that clearly wants to reinvent the wheel there in Madison. So, look, if they can somehow get back to 10-win seasons, first of all, they'll be in contention for a playoff. I mean, I mentioned last year the Big Ten would have had 5. If you win 10 games in the Big Ten, you're going to be one of those 5. So Wisconsin they can answer that question for themselves by having the same level of success. But it looks like they're going to do it a different route, JC. I don't see the ground and pound days. If you don't bring in Phil Longo to run that offense, that's you bring in Phil Longo to light up on a billboard to any potential quarterback and wide receiver. We are now involving you a lot more in what we do here. You matter, not just you, the 6'1", 230-pound workhorse tailback. Now it's the wide. They just got T.Y. Hilton's kid to commit. I think Wisconsin, you're right. Like, they have been a very underrated program for a long time, because when you think of the Big Ten, you're still going to think Ohio State, Michigan. Now, especially that they're back at full speed, so to speak. But I'll be very curious and fascinated to see what they do with a new offense now that they've got a couple of years under their belt.
Yeah, 8-6 last year. I it actually went to the, I guess 8-6. Oh no, Luke Fickell. They're giving him the credit for the one game. Okay, yeah. So anyway, 14 conference titles, 1 national title in 1942. 2 Heisman winners, including Ron Dane, 32 consensus All-Americans. It's been historically a good program. They went through between the 40s and Barry Alvarez, from 63 to 89, they didn't do anything. But I think that whole athletic department's underrated, because, I mean, they're really good at men's basketball too.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Big 2. I mean, the revenue sports, Wisconsin's good.
Have you been to Madison? Have you been?
I have. I drove, a friend of mine's dad had cancer, and they're from Waupun, Wisconsin. So during the pandemic, it was actually the day Will Muschamp was a game day, 2020 season. It was the day Will Muschamp got fired at South Carolina, because they played at Ole Miss that night. So the wife and I got in my truck, and we took this guy's dad, and he's since passed away. He fought pancreatic cancer for 5 years. So that shows you what people in Wisconsin are made of, man. He's an ice fisherman. Took him some shakes, because the chemo, he couldn't. He needed some protein shakes and stuff, and a chocolate cake from Portillo's for his wife. And it was during COVID, so we just sat him on the door we went to the little town, sat him on the door. We went by Madison on the way. And Madison as a town's a lot like Columbia, South Carolina, as far as it's a state capital. It's got some taller buildings and a campus in the middle of it. Or Knoxville or Baton Rouge, any place in the SEC. But there's a big, huge lake.
Huge, beautiful lake.
And so you get off the highway, Mike, you're going around these trees, almost like in a state park. You come around the corner, and there's this gigantic, beautiful lake and a big city up on a hill. And then Camp Randall is actually on an old Army camp base. I thought there was somebody named Camp Randall. You know how back in the 20s you had all these funny nicknames like
Coach
Scoop,
Camp Randall, leading his boys,
Big Ole, but it's an Army base, and the stadium is this big concrete coliseum and the place going. So there's a lot to like about Wisconsin. I mean, you mentioned the playoff. What's going to be funny is when they're about a 7 seed, and LSU has to go up there in December and play, or Auburn. Or name your Southern school, Clemson. Name your Southern school.
I love it.
I think that's good.
I want some cold weather playoff games.
We never associate college football with cold weather, because even in the Big Ten, it ends in November, maybe in November a little bit. But then all the bowls are always played either in domes or championship games are always in warm weather places or in domes. So we're not used to meaningful playoff college football or any kind of postseason college football being in cold weather at all. So that's gonna be very interesting.
Awesome.
Number 5.
All right, so they're unlimited coaches now. All these analysts that have been coaching, in my opinion, behind the scenes, they're now able to coach. That makes those jobs a little better for coaches. I think I think if people follow the spirit of it, I think it's going to help guys like alumni, like former players, come back and enter into kind of an apprenticeship program at their schools instead of having to work their way up, or, some retired guy or NFL guys that want to try college, high school coaches that are talented that want to spot. I think there's a lot of good that can come from it. But as we always talk about the gap, do you see, and I hope this doesn't happen because I think it kind of sucked because coaching a lot of times very incestuous and they just hire the same guys over and over. I hope it doesn't happen this way. Do you see a situation, though, because fans have brought it up, where your Alabamas and Georgias and Ohio States of the world are literally poaching other coaching staffs and making guys, paying them a lot and making them like, well, you're the assistant O-line coach here, but it's better to be here than there. Do you see a corner market on coaching talent, kind of like the concern is with NIL on player talent?
Yeah, I think we've already seen some of it. I'd say short answer to your question. I think the big boys are going to spend big dollars to poach coaches. I don't think there's any question. And it's all legal. There's no. When's the last time you saw somebody get caught for tampering in college football? Tampering goes on all the time. I mean, you think these players in the portal just magically, just show up at another school that's kid has never had any ties to that area or whatever?
Never.
No, it's just tampering going on. I mean,
that doesn't happen.
No, of course not. Of course not. All on the honor code system. Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely in play. I think that's absolutely in play. I mean, we touched on the whole saga going down in the Lone Star State. That's for a baseball coach. That's for a baseball coach. What do you think they're going to start doing for football coaches? And yes, football assistant coaches. There's going to be a lot of potential poaches out there. I think that's going to be part of it now. Now, again, if you're already a big boy with a big boy budget, you can fend a lot of that off. But there's always somebody out there that's got a little bit more. And as we always talk about, you just never know the personal situation. A coach's wife could rather live in another city. A coach could not get along with an AD. An assistant coach could not feel like he's underappreciated. You're not using my plays. I'm getting phased out. I should be a bigger voice in the room. All those things. So, short answer to that question for me, absolutely yes. Emphatic yes. All right, so we're running. We went long today, and we're going to take a little time off. So this might serve as a good thing because you can cut it up in like 3 different shows if you want. This is our friend Group 5 John. He always gives us a little something to chew on because, again, we're not elitists here. We don't just talk the same power schools every time out. How about this one? He says, I've got 3 coaches for you that should be in the discussion of potentially landing a P4 head coaching job in the future. Number 1 is a guy that I love, G.J. Kinney of Texas State. 35 years old, young and up and coming, runs an offense that is ultra exciting. 2020, he was the OC quarterback coach at Hawaii. Did not know that. 2021, he was the co-OC quarterback coach at UCF. Then he takes his first head coaching position at Incarnate Word, and he recruited Cam Ward. He's the guy that discovered Cam Ward. They go 12-2 and got to the FCS semifinals. In 2023, became the head coach of Texas State, led them to an 8-5 record and a first responder bowl over Rice. And I certainly think he's on a lot of radars already. Don't you? It's not the first time we've had his name mentioned.
GJ's a coach's kid, I think, out of high school. I covered him as a recruit. He originally signed with Texas. Was a part of those Mac Brown, Texas quarterback. We missed on like 8 of them, but ended up going. And the reason he was at Hawaii, I think he played at Tulsa under Todd Graham, who we hadn't heard from. Pretty good coach. Got fired for having a winning record and replaced by you play to win the game.
You play to win the game.
But Todd resurfaced in Hawaii, and I think he got fired down there for some reasons, but we hadn't heard from him in a while. But that's why he's in Hawaii. So
35.
I like him. I mean, he's a football mind. He's a coach's kid. And he's won at some places. You never heard of Incarnate Word before him, and now you've heard of him. Texas State was kind of the worst program in Texas. The Bobcats in San Marcos. They used to be Southwest Texas State.
Was Kathy Ireland the kicker there? Or was that a different Texas school?
Scott Bakula, quarterback. Wally Riggendorf, played by the most underrated actor of all time, Robert Loggia. Yes. Sinbad on the team.
Yes.
Anyway,
We'll do Fiber Dimer next show.
Yeah, they changed it. They were like, they were Southwest Texas. They're like, hey, let's just be Texas State. There was a movie. Anyway, winning there. I mean, yeah, I think eventually G.J. Kinney's going to be a big-time coach. Issue is going to be a lot of times these up-and-comers in Texas never leave Texas, so they kind of sit around and they'll take Baylor or they'll take, TCU or Texas Tech when it opens, and they'll wait for A&M, or kind of like we saw with Schlossnagle, they'll wait for A&M or Texas to open, or Oklahoma would be acceptable, Oklahoma State. I'd like to see him go get a shot in a big league somewhere else, because I think
he will.
I think SEC. I mean, Arkansas would be a legitimate spot for him. If I'm Hunter Yurachek, and I'm not rehiring Bobby Petrino, Bobby Petrino would probably be the first coach ever to coach 2 Power 5 schools 2 different times. Because remember, he got rehired at Louisville. How did that end? How did that work out? Not good. If you rehire him at Arkansas, they're going to the abyss. I mean, they were in the abyss for 2 years under Chad Morris, backsliding like hell now. You give Petrino that full-time job. You're not the right RIP Ryan Mallett. Those days aren't coming back, man. So
all right.
Anyway, he'd be good there.
Okay. In the interest of time, I'm going to go through the next 2
pretty
quick before we wrap things up. That's all right. Miami of Ohio, Chuck Martin. Chuck Martin's 56, experienced coach with Division II titles at Grand Valley State. He won in 05 and 06. DB coach at Notre Dame in 2010. Upgraded to OC at Notre Dame 2012 to 13. Head coach of Miami, Ohio in 2014. They were 11-3 last year in the MAC. The thing I like about judging a coach in the MAC is that everybody's on a level playing field. Nobody's got 5 stars. Nobody's got a huge recruiting budget. At that point, it's all about who's got the best coach in a lot of cases. And every now and then, you get a Ben Roethlisberger, and obviously that's a different deal. But you find out who can really coach ball in a league like the MAC. 3 straight bowl games, 2 MAC championships, signed a 5-year extension. We know that means nothing. A big boy, if he wanted, could just buy it out. But Chuck Martin is number 2. And then Jacksonville State, a name familiar to everybody, a man who turned down the Alabama job that paved the way for Nick Saban to get it. Rich Rodriguez at Jacksonville State, now 61 years of age. Everybody knows this resume. Does Rich Rod ever get back into it?
Interesting. Chuck Martin, real quick.
Yeah.
Somebody needs to get out there, listeners. Go look up what kind of situation Miami of Ohio had at quarterback last year. I think they went through that serious injury issues. They didn't even have hardly any they had bad injury issues. Still won 11 games. And then 2 of their players ended up going to the SEC, Rashad Amos and Gage Larvadane. They're starting running back, starting receiver. So pretty good coach, but Chuck Martin.
Awesome stuff. Thanks again to Group 5 John on that. Thanks again to Josh Pate, our producer, the Mad Dog Phil Mullinax. And most of all, thanks everybody out there that tunes in each and every week to this podcast. We know there's a lot of space out there, and you folks have been terrific as we continue to grow in numbers throughout the country and continue to give you what you want and get some great guests. Josh was terrific as always. I know a lot of you can't listen live, but it'll be on every format from YouTube to Spotify to iTunes, Google Play, et cetera, et cetera. The website is JC and Morgan. We'll start doing a better job with emails. Start flooding that inbox, and we'll get to them, I promise you. Questions that you might have throughout the show. And we had some great ones here today. JC, my man, enjoy a little bit of time off, a little rest, and look forward to getting back with you soon.
Yeah, getting after it. Thanks, Mike, and thanks to everybody that makes this show great. And we're looking forward to another year. We've been doing this since the 2016 football season.
Wow.
This is our ninth football season.
That's crazy. That's crazy. Time flies when you're having fun.
You haven't aged a day, Mike.
I don't know about that. It's all It's all the heavy Botox. I don't even know what that meant.
Sponsored by Botox.
Yeah. I haven't reached that level of vagueness yet. That'll do it for us, for JC and Mad Dog, for Josh Pate, for everybody tuning in. Thank you so much. We'll see you next week on JC and Morgan.